Hello everybody. Good morning, afternoon or evening, and a warm welcome to everyone joining our webinar. We have prepared two webinars that will show you how to make public-facing documents more complete, appealing, and also compliant to fast-changing regulatory requirements as well. In my approach, I will try to merge the best of two worlds together, the flexibility of the electronic reporting data source modeling and the Docentric's user-friendly, time-saving designer and improved report distribution and archiving. We will focus on sales invoice as it is the most common public-facing document, but the same or similar logic applies to other reports too. We have recently presented a series of 4 webinars over the electronic reporting framework capabilities and the detailed research on configurable business documents. For those of you who have not yet seen them, you can watch the series later on as it is available on our YouTube channel. This is a great starting point to learn all about electronic reporting and business documents from the basics on. So, my name is Klemen Novak and I am Solution Architect and Partner Channel Manager at Docentric. And today I would like to show you how to simplify some tasks considerably and even do things you cannot do with the standard electronic reporting and business documents framework in D365FO. You might think that I'm starting a magic show, and you're right. My goal is to show you how functional consultants, power users, and end users can use the electronic reporting configurations instead of code. By watching both of my webinars, you should have all the basic skills and insights to get you started on your own. You will be able to add data and attachments such as terms and conditions, product specifications, or images to reports and merge it to a single document. Until now, this was a scenario that was reserved for developers. Of course, if you already have basic developer skills, this will help you get started faster. Let's start our magic non-code show. So, what's on today's agenda? In short introduction, I will highlight a few cool things about the D365FO electronic reporting and configurable business documents framework, and then we will look at what I will demonstrate in this and the next webinar. We will also make high-level overview of electronic reporting and configurable business documents framework for outgoing documents and show you how we improved it with Docentric. Next up is a live demo where I will show you how to create sales invoice with multilingual terms and conditions in action. During the presentation, you are welcome to ask questions and I will try to answer them at the end of the webinar. We should be finished in about 45 minutes, plus what it takes me to answer your questions. Okay, let's see what's cool about electronic reporting framework. You can add any kind of data available in D365FO to the outgoing reports by modifying only the configurations. Not just the data from tables, views, or data entities, but also output from methods, complex formulas, and calculated fields, etc. We can reuse all existing SSRS reports with their customizations because configurable business documents run on top of SSRS pipeline. It is possible to make modifications on the report design and data now without involving developers and without classical code deployments. Functional consultants, power users, can indeed do things that they were not able to do before. But on the other hand, this could also mean some extra work for them because this is something the developers used to do before. So now let's take a look what we will be doing in this session. I will show you how simple it is to create a sales invoice with multilingual general terms and conditions. As you will later on see, I will be using only configuration in D365FO electronic reporting framework, Docentric, and Microsoft Word documents to achieve this goal. By storing terms and conditions in all the languages as Microsoft Word documents on the legal entities attachments and using Docentric subdocument feature and merge them into one single document. Let me just say that document merging is not possible without Docentric. In the upcoming webinar next week, I will use the results from this session and add product images to sales invoice that gives a nice touch and a higher degree of professionalism to your public-facing documents. On the other hand, your customers will always know what was being or is ordered from a vendor. I will show you how easy it is to bring images in the data source from D365 to report generator and how to apply them in the generated document. And last but not least, in the next webinar, we will add a cherry on top by adding the product specifications to sales invoices. As you know, product specification add additional explanation to the general terms and conditions on the public-facing document, like product dimensions, look and feel, technical data, warranty information, etc., and thus making them complete and compliant with the fast-changing regulatory requirements. Before we start with the live demo, let us take a look at the high-level data flow illustration of the electronic reporting framework. We will be focusing on the outgoing documents. As we can see, there are two main configurations. The first one is the model configuration. Here we are pulling and transforming the data from D365FO via model mapping to the data model. The data model is an abstract representation of data structure that contains all the necessary information which we will be using on the outgoing document. The second one is the format configuration, and it represents the definition of what kind of an outgoing document we will be creating. For example, XML, Microsoft Excel, or Word, and how we are presenting the fetched and transformed data on the document. Microsoft added an additional layer on top of format configuration called Configurable Business Documents, which enables users in Dynamics with tools to customize Microsoft Excel or Word report templates. But how does the electronic reporting framework work with Docentric? As we can see on the following illustration, we at Docentric have built our product on top of electronic reporting framework and replaced the format configuration with the Docentric configuration. When the data model is prepared, we take over the format pipeline by selecting the correct Docentric designs stored in SharePoint, Azure, or internally in D365FO. All the designs are made in Microsoft Word by using our designer, as I will show you later on in the live demo. When the correct Docentric design is selected, it is passed with the data model to our document generator and via improved output management to the desired print destination. Electronic reporting and business documents framework currently uses Microsoft Excel, which is, by the way, a great tool for generating on-the-fly reports for data analysis, but I think in this case we would get the most out of our generated document if we could use Microsoft Word as a basis for our reports, as we need a nicely designed and structured document. Electronic reporting and business documents framework also supports Microsoft Word, but there are only few examples available and there is no possibility to add an additional document content from other Microsoft Word documents. I will show you now how easy such a task can be done with the Docentric subdocument feature. And now, as Wayne would say to Garth in Wayne's World movie series, party on, Garth. I should probably say back to Wayne and also to you, let's party on and start our magic non-code show now. So now I will switch my desktop to my virtual machine and I will start with the live demo. Before I go deep into the electronic framework, I want to set a baseline. So I will show you how the sales invoice looks like now in my system. So in order to do this, I will go to all sales order. I will select sales order. I will go to the invoice journal and I will select one invoice, already generated invoice from my invoice journal. And let us look at how it looks like. So we're generating the document and it will shortly be displayed on the screen, and we can see this is the design. So we can see that this is the SSRS report design, which is already using Docentric. We call these designs replica designs, and why we call them replica designs? Because we reversed engineered the most common used reports in SSRS that are used in D365. So now let's go back and take a look at the terms and conditions that we will be using in this demo. I already prepared some documents and let me show you how terms and conditions look like. For my example, I have terms and conditions in 4 languages, and let me open the English one. and we see this is a nicely crafted document which was designed in Microsoft Word. And the nice thing here is that we will be using all these design features that Word offers when we will be merging the document, this terms and conditions document, to the sales invoice. So let me just change a color here to show you that we are doing a live demo. Okay, let's save this. And I also have other languages. Here is the German one. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is to add these general terms and conditions to our legal entity, to our current legal entity. So we are in the company Contoso Entertainment System USA, and we need to go to our legal entities and find and select the Contoso Entertainment Systems. Here on the right upper side, we have attachments, where we will attach all these terms and conditions designed in Microsoft Word. And I will add a new file. I will select the terms and conditions in English. So now I have added the file, and I will also use extended properties from Docentric to specify in which language these terms and conditions are written in. So I will select English US. I will also select a category, which will allow me to filter only terms and conditions from the legal entities attachments. And I will also say that this is a global attachment. So I will save this now. And I will not use this form for adding other documents. I will go back and I will show you how you can easily do that via our Docentric framework. So I'm clicking to the Docentric framework. I go to the global attachments. I select again the current legal entity, click on the global attachments, and I get a nice list. And now I just add all the other terms and conditions. So I'll be adding the German one, again selecting category ID and the language, German, and save this. And again, I will add the French one. Let's say the French one. And do the same thing again for this one. Save. Okay, so now we set up the legal entity terms and conditions. How will we now bring them to our report, to our sales invoice? First thing I want to show you is, because I already showed you how our replica design of sales invoice looks like, I would like to import everything in the electronic reporting frameworks. So in order to do that, I must go to the electronic reporting framework, to the report configurations, and import already prepared by Microsoft general electronic configurations for invoice model. So I will first import the invoice model, which will contain all the data necessary for report generation. And then I will import also the invoice model mapping. So the invoice model mapping will fetch and transform the data from the data source to the model. Okay, I added also the invoice model. And now I will also import the format of the electronic reporting and business documents framework. Why I'm doing this? Just to show you how generated document from electronic reporting looks like. So we will be using Excel for this example. So now I'm done. And if I want to show you now how this works, I'm also going to use Docentric, and I'm going into the report setup. I will look at sales invoice. I will go to the print management, select the customer invoice, and select that I will be using the report format of sales invoice Excel. So this is basically the one I just imported now. And now I will save this, and let's try again to print out the sales invoice. And let's see what we will get now. Okay, now we got a sales invoice that was printed out in Excel format. As we can see, it's slightly different from the one that I was using from the SSRS report design, and this is the basis from which we will start on. We already made configurable business documents, ready-made replicas, which were also reverse engineered from this design. Okay, so now let's start configuring the system. Let's go back to the electronic reporting framework, to the report configurations, and let's extend the model and model mapping that we just import. So how do we do this? Basically, we need to create a new configuration which will be derived from invoice model, from Microsoft's invoice model, and we will name it invoice model Docentric, and we will create the new derived invoice model configuration. Next thing I need to do is to extend this model with additional data. And how do I do this? By selecting it, going to the designer and searching for the sales invoice node, clicking on new, and we will add a new child node. We will name this child node terms and conditions and select that this is a record list. Why a record list? I will tell you that a little bit later, and now I will just add it. Okay, we also give it a static label text so that we can later on better see what this is. And we also need to switch the items reference. What is the items reference? This is basically a type of some other node in this invoice model structure, which will contain all the data in this record list. So I will use an existing item reference because in the important invoice model I already got additional document reference, and this node already contains all the fields that I need for later on for the report generation. So I will just select the additional document reference, and I will show you what additional document reference, which fields it has. So basically we have the content, which is a container where we will store the document, the terms and condition documents, document, which I will later use as a subdocument in our sales invoice report. And all the other information which is for this demo not needed, but I will also map them so that I can show you also this scenario. So now we're done in the invoice model, and we just have to save the invoice model and we go back. Now we have to create a derived invoice model mapping, and we will do the same as we did with the invoice model, and we create a new configuration. We derive it from the invoice model mapping. We give it a name, invoice model mapping Docentric. And the one thing that you have to be careful here is to select the correct target model, because we are not using now the invoice model from Microsoft configuration, but our extended invoice model Docentric. So I have to select this one and click on create configuration. And now we have the new model mapping, the extended model mapping. The next thing we need to do is to design and add additional data sources to the model mapping and to be able to bind them to the data model. So the first thing, we will be using the model, the data source mapping of the sales invoice, and we will rename it so we know that this is the one that we were changing, Docentric. Okay, and I will save it. And usually I go back because in this editor I sometimes get stuck and lose everything. So that's why I went back, and I will go back to the designer and again select the sales invoice data source mapping. And now we are going to the designer. So in the designer, we have on the left side the mappings data source types from which we will create data sources, and those data sources can later on be used to bind them to the data model. So basically here we have all the necessary elements that we need to use to complete our mission. And now let's start building our configuration. First thing we need to do is to extend the current data source with the table, and we will add a new data source to the root, and we will call this table company info. Why company info table? Because we need to select the current legal entity from the database, and we will add this data source to the configuration. The one thing when I was digging into electronic reporting was I did not understand why they decided to separate table and table records, because table is not something you are fetching from the database, but it's only a table definition which has methods defined on the table, and basically over the methods you can then get the data from the database. Okay, the second thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new table records to the root of the data sources, and I will call them docuref records. I will bind them to the docuref table, because this table contains all the attachments in the systems that are connected to any entity. And the next thing, I will add a new calculated field to the company info table that I have added by selecting on the left side calculated field. And now I won't be adding the data source on the root. I will be adding it to the company info. Why is that? Because it's easier then to understand which data comes from which data source. And I will just click on add, define the parameter's name, current legal entity, and I will go to the formula editor. So now I'm in formula editor, where I again can use all the data sources available in this model mapping. And on the right side, I have all the functions that I can use when writing this script here. And I will copy an already prepared script for this purpose. And what I'm doing here, basically from the company info, which is this @ here, I'm calling the method find data area. And by doing this and passing from the existing data sources, in this case sales invoice header, footer, and passing inside the data area ID, I will select the current legal entity. And if everything is correct, when I click save, I don't get here any error, and this is okay. And we have done this. The next thing I will try to select the correct term and condition document from the docuref table, and I will do this by adding a calculated field to the root of the data sources, and I will name this new parameter as current legal entity terms and conditions by language. Why by language? Because this will return me the correct Word document according to the defined language on the generated sales invoice. And again, I'm going to the formula editor. And by the way, I'm already using the latest version of D365. So I already have inside the Monaco editor, which is the basis of, for those of you who know, for Microsoft Visual Code editor, which is one of the most popular code editors for scripting and writing program languages. So again, I will add a prepared script. And what I'm doing here, I'm doing filtering over the docuref table with the following condition. I'm going to select the current company and all the records contained for all the attachments for the current company. So basically, I'm fetching the current legal entity's rec ID, also referring to the reference table of the current legal entities. So this is the table the party table, and I want to fetch only terms and conditions. So I also added an additional condition, which is the category ID, and I stated that I want only terms and conditions. And the last thing in this condition is the language, the requested language. For those of you who have been maybe exploring a little bit electronic reporting framework, we have two functions. One I used is the filter, and this one converts this expression to a SQL statement in the database, which is then fetching data. The second one is the where function, but the where function is used only for in-memory tables. So it's basically filtering the data that you already have fetched from the database. So this is basically the main difference. And now we need to save again this formula, and we go back. We save it. But let us ask now, what if we don't have terms and condition in the selected language? For example, we are generating a document in German language, and maybe we don't have terms and conditions for German language. In this case, we would like to have a fallback terms and conditions, let's say in English language. And that's why we will add an additional parameter to the data source. Again, we will add it to root. We will name it the same as previous, but without by language. And again, we will add a new expression, which is basically a condition. If we don't receive the correct terms and conditions according to the requested language, then we will fetch the terms and condition in US English language. But if we did get back the terms and condition in the selected language, we will return the data from previous calculated parameter. Okay, again, we save this and go back. And the last thing we need to do now is to bind the data sources to the data model. So we added this calculated field, we select it, we select the terms and conditions in the data model, we just bind it, and now we need to bind all the fields of this record list. So basically we need to bind content, we need to bind document type, and so on. And for the let us bind the first one through the user interface. So I will be using method to fetch, and I think this will be the right one for me. So get file content as container. This will return the binary data of the terms and conditions document. So I will bind it, and I will also bind some other fields. So let's say document type. I will just add the expression and also the file name so that we can later on see all this information on our report design. Okay, now we're done, and we save again, and we go back again. And the one thing I've learned is to do a double check. So basically we select again the designer and we check if we have all the bindings on our model. Yes, we do. Here we see it. Okay. Now we need to design the new report. So how we will do that? We will go back to the Docentric workspace, to our report setup, and we will look at the sales invoice. And if I go inside, we can see that I have 3 template designs. This one was used before when I set the baseline, so sales invoice report, which is basically a replica design of SSRS, and I already have a replica designs for electronic reporting framework. So what I need to do now is to select it and download this already made replica design. I need to open it in Microsoft Word. And we can see that this document already has a lot of fields defined in it. But before I start modifying this document, I need also the data from the D365 environment. How to do this? The first thing I would like to do is to go to print management and select the customer invoice again. And now I will change back the report format to the sales invoice report. So this means that the Docentric pipeline will take over. And the next thing I want to do is to change the print destination to generate me the Docentric data source package file, which will be the sample data that I will be using to extend my report. And this data source package file will contain all the data and all the labels in English US language, and also for the designing purpose in some other languages like German, Spanish, and French. And I just save now, and I will open a new window. And the next thing I need to do, again, select the sales invoice and connect the sales invoice report to the correct configurable business documents electronic reporting data model. So I will here select invoice model Docentric and the model mapping sales invoice Docentric. So now you see why I've changed all the names so that it's easier to select the business documents data source. Okay, I think I have everything set up. So now I can go back to the sales invoice, sales orders, select the sales order, go to the invoices, and I will now use the print management to generate the Docentric data source package files. As we can see, I have downloaded 2 files, and now I will open back again my report design. And before I start, I will save it to my drive, and not in this folder, but in my demo folder, and I will replace this document. Okay. Now we're going to the end of the document, and I will remove from this document the data that I have already prepared before, but I will show you again how I did this. So I will add now the subdocument. First thing I need to do is to use the Docentric tab here. And on the Docentric tab, I have a few tagging elements that I can use for adding data to our report design. But before I do this, I need to fetch the new data source, which will contain also terms and conditions. So let us select the generated DDSP package file, And now we can see that we have also terms and conditions in our data source, and that it contains content, document type, and file name fields. So what is inside this DDSP package? We can click on the preview data of the DDSP package, and if we go a little bit lower, we can see that this is the data that was fetched from the D365. Okay, now we will be building our report design. So we first add if tagging element. Why if tagging element? Because we only want to show the terms and conditions if they are present in the data source. And in this case, we will be using an expression. And this expression basically checks if the terms and condition record list has at least one item, then please show me this area that I'm adding to the document design. And now we will position us inside this if tagging element, and we will add a page break. So this page break is again added only if this condition is met. And the next thing we want to do is to use our designer's subdocument feature. So basically we just select the subdocument tagging element. And again, we need to put in the expression which will bind this tagging element to the data that I received from the server. And again, I will put in the expression, which is basically sales invoice terms and conditions. And I will select the first item in the record list and fetch the data from the content field. I could do this also by using our XPath editor by just clicking over the data tree. Okay, and the formats that I can use, I used a Word document, but I could also use an HTML document for merging with the base document. And now we are basically set. So we save this report, and how to apply it to the system. So it's really easy. Basically, we go back to the Docentric workspace. We click again on the reports. We look for sales invoice, and we add here to the sales invoice CBD report template, and we attach the new file. And I will use the Azure storage and upload a new file and select the one that I was just modifying and save it. And now we're set up. So let us check if our magic works now. So we're going back to sales orders. We again select the sales order. We check the already created invoices, and let's see what we will get as a result. So now if everything works, I will be getting back the correct design, and at the bottom of the document I should see the terms and conditions. And as we can see, we have a problem, so don't panic. I will check again what I missed here. The one thing I forgot, because when we are printing the original, as I used here, the Docentric pipeline always selects the default template design. And because I didn't select the sales invoice for the electronic reporting framework, this SSRS design was used. And I need to select it, set it as default, and go again back and try it again. So let's see if we solve the problem. As we can see, the design is different, and we also can see terms and conditions, and we also here have our blue color for the heading of the terms and conditions. So that means that all the Word documents that I added to the legal entity are working and are merging with our sales invoice. So now let's try also something else. Let's try to print the terms and conditions and an invoice in a different language. So let's go back and let's go on the sales invoice, where I will change on the invoice account now the language. So I would set here the language to German and save it. And now I will go back. And again, back to the invoices. And I have already prepared an invoice that was created in a German language. And now let's check if we will receive on the generated document also the German terms and conditions. So we see now the document is printed in German language. All the labels are used from the system. And also, yeah, we got back the Geschäftsbedingungen. So basically this is our terms and conditions in German language. Great. It seems that our magic is working. And now let's just change this back again to English language for further demonstration. To English US, save again and go back. And the next thing, I'm going to show you also how to use improved print destination, especially email with Docentric. So how do I do this? I will go again back to the report design and select on our report setup the print management, because I will be using the print management to print this sales invoice, and I will change the destination to the Docentric email print destination. One of the nice things here is that you can use our placeholders, which will replace from the data at the runtime when you are generating the report with the actual data from the data sources. So here I'm dynamically generating the subject. The second thing I'm dynamically changing is the attachment's name. So I'm passing in the invoice number. And another cool thing is that we can also specify a body, which, by the way, is not possible with SSRS standard functionality in D365. But in electronic reporting, this is possible also with the expression editor that I was using before. And now, as we can see, I have nicely crafted also the email body, in which I have bolded all the placeholders so that we can see which data will be replaced when I receive the email. And I also added some additional images. First one is from the current worker, and the second one is our company's logo. So I will go back and save and try again to print another invoice, but in this case I will be using print management. And now this invoice should be sent over the email to our customer. And let me check in my mailbox if I already have received the email. Yes, I did. I'll show you how it looks like. So now you see it's really nicely crafted email with the body, which has all the data, dynamic data replaced from the data source. And we also have a nice personal touch. We have added a nice personal touch to it by adding the Julia's image in the email signature. Now let's look at the invoice. So yeah, this is again the generated invoice in the selected language with the general terms and conditions. Now we're done with the live demo, and let me just go back to the presentation. As the time is running out, let's do the wrap-up of today's session. We have created a nice looking multilingual sales invoice with terms and conditions by using Microsoft Word, we all know. Then we added terms and conditions Word documents to legal entities as attachments with Docentric improved categories. We also used the electronic reporting framework configuration instead of writing code and deploying it to D365FO. We also updated the sales invoice design by using the Docentric Microsoft Word Designer. And finally, we generated and distributed the sales invoice to the end customer by using the Docentric improved print destinations. If you noticed, I was spending most of my time in the electronic reporting framework configuration and only a fraction of it in our Docentric design. I think you would agree with me that this is definitely a time and money saver. Let's also mention here that improved Docentric report distribution and archiving I showed you definitely improves the both worlds, especially SSRS world and also electronic report. And with us, we've got you covered. If you have ever run into similar problems, maybe we can help you solve them. So don't be a stranger and get in touch with us. Next week, we will continue to improve the existing sales invoice by adding product images and product specifications. This will definitely make your documents look professional and appealing. So now let's start the Q&A and see if we got any questions. Yeah, we did. The first question is, how do you pass parameters to the functions in the formula editor? I've noticed that the names of parameters were in single quotes and their properties or methods were not. Okay, let me switch back to my virtual machine. Let's go to the electronic reporting configurations, to our model mapping. Go to the designer, and I will try to quickly explain this to you. And let us check this data source expression. Okay, the first thing, all the functions that are on the right side are without single quotes. So you write them like this and you use them like normal functions in any expressions. This expression is similar to, let's say, Excel expressions. The next thing here we have is this parameter. So basically the custom defined parameters are, and also all defined data sources here that we can see, are always referenced in single quotes, but their parameters are not, as we can see here. But this also is true only for calculated fields. So as we can see here, if you are using table definitions or table records, we are using it without the single quotes. Maybe another, if I would show you another expression, for example, this one. Let's check the table company info. Calculated field. We can see also here in the formula editor that we have here another example when we're fetching from the company info table, which is basically this @ sign, because we are currently on the company info and we are using its method, and its method is always used with single quotes, and then we specify here all the parameters. Okay. The next question we got, since we are adding attached files as subdocuments into the Word templates, are there any limitations as to what file types can be added? Yes, as I showed you when I was doing the report design, we have the possibility to add subdocuments from Microsoft Word documents and also from an HTML source. So basically, if we fetch the data from D365 in the data source as a binary content, we can only use basically Microsoft Word and HTML. Okay, the next one is how it is possible to check if the data model and data binding are set up correctly. How can you troubleshoot it? I would say the easiest way would be to go to Docentric workspace, go to the report setup, and select on the report you're currently working on to always generate the DDSP class. So then when you're doing, then you generate a few samples, different samples. Each time you change something in reporting configuration and you import it again in our report designer. And if you get the data here, then you probably did binding between the model and model mapping correct. And you can also check here what kind of data you get back. So basically when you click on the preview data, you can also view what you got back. For example, this is the binary data, and here I can see also other stuff. And one nice thing here is also that I didn't show you before, is to use our preview functionality in the report designer. So when you basically click on the preview, you will get the created document from the data source that I just used in our report designer. The second option is also to use our live preview, which is, by the way, a really cool feature, and it always changes when I change something to the document. So I added some static text and the preview is already being generated. Okay, and I can see I added some additional text to the document. Okay, now we have a few minutes left. I will also go to the next question. So how do you deploy the template from development environment to other environments, such as the UAT environment or production environment? So basically it's really simple. As you saw in the electronic reporting framework, I used load functionality for importing the data sources. You can do the same for exporting. In Docentric, you can basically, as I showed you, just add the new design by just selecting the sales report and adding a new file to the selected template. There is also some other possibilities because you can also export all the configuration of the Docentric environment from this environment to the, let's say, production environment of D365, but this is more complex way, so I won't go so deep into that now. Okay, I think we are done with the questions, so let me just do the wrap-up. Thank you for taking the time, and once again, I hope you enjoyed watching our webinar. If you will have any other question, I welcome you to send them to me or to our support, and we will get back to you. I hope to see you next week.